One that a lot of people wanted to hear about politicians or our candidates from was about renewable energy. Now, we've got a lot of renewable energy projects going on in the region. Energy prices and electricity prices are a big topic. What's your policies and personal views on renewable energy?
Well, first of all, what I'm about to say are my personal views. Does not necessarily reflect the policies, a policy of the senior United Party. But I believe that renewables are ruining the country. It is because of government intervention and interference in the markets with massive subsidies for renewables that have destroyed the coal industry and, the coal-fired power stations. And these are a direct result of the huge increases in electricity prices. I believe in renewables. I believe there will be a time when renewables will be effective and will be certainly cost effective, but they are not at the moment. The subsidies are huge. At the moment, we are looking at $60 billion worth of renewables by the year of subsidies for renewables by the year 2030. And we have the ludicrous situation, and that will be passed on to the consumer and to the taxpayer, as is already happening. Over 100,000 people have had their electricity cut off across Australia by the end of 2016 because of the huge increase in electricity prices. And with that goes, of course, much hardship, jobs that are lost, industries that are shut down, and also industries that cannot produce as much as they have been in the past.
In terms of the renewable subsidies, where do you stand on the billions of dollars in coal subsidies that the government gives big companies?
Well, I don't think a government. Which coal subsidies are you talking about?
There are billions of dollars.
Well, I'm talking about energy generation, and which comes out as electricity. And at the moment, one of the clean energy targets is, which hasn't been implemented yet, but it's certainly a target, and that is being spoken about, is $60 a kilowatt hour. That means that solar and wind, the renewables, will receive $60 subsidy from the government, but a super ultra critical coal plant would receive $3.75. And of course that prices them out of the market. And we have the ludicrous situation where the policies of both Labor and the coalition have priced the coal-fired power stations out of the market, and now the Prime Minister is now trying to bring them back in. So it's contradictory policy that is having a dreadful effect on the people of Australia, on livelihoods, on industries, and so on. I believe that there is a place for renewables. The technology hasn't caught up yet. The renewables industry keeps saying that it will lead to lower prices. It doesn't, and it hasn't. And they say it's going to be cheaper, or that it is cheaper now than coal-fired energy or gas-fired energy. But in fact, they're still holding their hands out for subsidies. So there is so much contradictory and inconsistent information that is coming. As an example, AGL claims to be environmentally aware and so on. It gets more than 90% of its revenue from its coal-fired power station.
Which it's starting to move away from coal, though.
Well, it's starting to move away, but it could not do that without the huge subsidies that it receives. I think $500 million is what it's receiving. And its 2 solar power plants in New South Wales produce 4% of the capacity of the Liddell coal-fired power station.
What are your thoughts on the Liddell power station? Should we extend its life, or is it's I think 60, could even be up to 70 years old? Do we extend its life more, or do we?
I think we have to extend its life because without it we are not going to have the reliable baseload that we need. And already the Australian Energy Market Operator is warning of blackouts across the country. And we saw exactly what that happened when the Premier Weatherall in South Australia took the Port Augusta power station out of the mix in May last year. There was an immediate surge in power prices up to 75%, and of course in September last year there was a statewide blackout.
But
those are the consequences.
But that was actually due to old power stations.
No, I reject that.
The Australian Energy Market Operator actually said that the large power stations like Liddell are actually the biggest danger to our reliable energy supply. The grand old ladies, I believe they call them.
I've not heard that comment, and I'm afraid I can't accept that. Why would Prime Minister Turnbull be talking about trying to keep Liddell open, and even talking about, there is talk, of course, about new coal-fired power stations. We need reliable baseload energy, and we do not get that with wind and solar. When the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, battery storage. Look, I believe that one day we will have very adequate and also inexpensive battery storage that will contribute to inexpensive energy for consumers across Australia. But that is not yet, and we are creating dreadful imposts on the country and on industry, on livelihoods. The lower socioeconomic, people in the lower socioeconomic areas spend 8.8% of their disposable income on energy. Those who are much wealthier spend 2.4% of their income on their disposable income on energy. There is inequality in this, and both parties are banging on continually about fairness and inequality, but they are in fact imposing inequality and unfairness on those who can least bear the burden.
In terms of electricity prices, how do you and your party propose we get them down? This is one of the big issues across the nation at the moment.
Well, I think government has to step away. Every time government interferes, which government has done, it's interfered with the markets with these massive subsidies and then backtracked in various ways. The reforms in the 1990s demonstrated that the government monopoly or government-owned energy generators were inefficient. I think it has to be a free market, properly regulated and free market enterprise, and without any impediments being placed by government through subsidies to competitors or to alternative sources of generation. Let the generation companies stand on their own 2 feet, or be equal in the subsidies that are provided. Let's have equality. The other thing that I think we need to do is talk about nuclear energy. And people are not even talking about it, they're shying away from it. But there are 448 nuclear power plants around the world today. France has 58, 75% of France's electricity is generated by nuclear. Germany pulled out of nuclear generation after the Fukushima disaster in Japan, in which no one died from radiation sickness or the effects of radiation. And it is now, but because it pulled out of that, it's now buying its electricity from France. So it's just an absurd situation. And we have, as a country, we are rich in uranium, we're rich in coal, clean coal, and rich in gas, and we have the resources. We're selling it abroad, but we're not using it for our own benefit. And it's a conversation we need to have. Instead of shutting it down, it needs to be frank, it needs to be fair, it needs to be explained. I'm afraid Mr. Turnbull has failed as a communicator, but these things need to be communicated properly without fear-mongering, without bias, without prejudice to the people of Australia, so that they properly understand what we have, the alternatives, the options, and the consequences of going one way or the other.